In the dusty village of Asempa, in the heart of rural Ghana, people believe strongly in signs, whispers, and curses. Unfortunately, most of those whispers were about me. "My son, avoid that boy," mothers would say. "Misfortune follows him like a shadow." They said I was cursed because strange things happened around me. The day I was born, lightning struck the old baobab tree near the shrine. When I was 10, the village well dried up the moment I tried to draw water. Even goats seemed nervous when I walked past. My name is Kojo Mensah, but nobody called me that. To them, I was simply Kojo the Cursed. I grew up alone, sitting under mango trees while the other boys played football in the red dust. Even the elders watched me carefully, as though my breath alone could ruin a harvest. Only one person never avoided me. Omasewa, the chief's daughter. She was fearless, beautiful, and curious in a way that frightened the village women. When everyone else crossed the road to avoid me, Oma sat beside me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You are not cursed," she told me once, biting into a roasted corn. I laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the entire village." She smiled. "One day, Kojo, they will regret how they treated you." I didn't believe her. How could I? A cursed boy could never rise in Asempa. At least, that's what everyone believed. None of them knew the scandal that was quietly growing beneath the surface of the village. Not even the chief himself. Chief Kwabena ruled Asempa with the calm authority of a man whose word carried the weight of the ancestors. His palace stood on the hill like a silent judge over the entire village. But one morning, the chief announced something that shook everyone. He called the villagers to the square. "My daughter Omasewa," he declared, "has refused every suitor in this village." Men murmured nervously. Ama was the most desired woman in Asempa. Farmers, hunters, and traders had all tried their luck. All failed. The chief raised his staff. Silence fell instantly. "So today," he continued, "I declare a challenge. Any man who completes the 3 trials of Asempa will marry my daughter and inherit my palace when my time ends." The crowd gasped. The trial sounded impossible. First, retrieve the sacred golden drum hidden deep in the forbidden forest. Second, wrestle and defeat the strongest man in the village, Kofi the Bull. Third, uncover the truth behind the mysterious disappearances of goats across Asempa. The villagers buzzed with excitement. Brave men stepped forward immediately. I stood quietly at the edge of the crowd. Then someone laughed loudly. "Maybe the cursed boy should try." The crowd erupted in cruel laughter. But Oma did not laugh. She looked straight at me. Something strange passed between us, a silent understanding that made my chest tighten. "Kojo," she said softly. The entire village turned toward me. My heart pounded. Before I could stop myself, I stepped forward. "I will take the challenge." The laughter grew louder. Even the chief looked surprised. But Oma was smiling. And somehow, that smile felt like the beginning of trouble. The forbidden forest outside Asempa had terrified villagers for generations. Stories claimed spirits lived there, spirits that punished anyone foolish enough to enter. Naturally, the villagers believed sending Kojo the curse there was perfect entertainment. If the spirits take him, someone laughed, at least the curse will leave our village. I ignored them. The forest swallowed sunlight the moment I stepped inside. Tall trees twisted like watchful giants, and the air smelled of damp earth and old secrets. Somewhere inside this forest was the sacred golden drum of Asempa, the first trial. Legend said the drum had belonged to the ancestors themselves. Whoever returned it to the village square would prove bravery beyond doubt. Hours passed. The deeper I walked, the stranger the forest felt. Then I heard voices. Not spirits. Men. I crept closer and froze. 3 villagers stood in a hidden clearing. And between them, the golden drum. My heart nearly burst when I recognized one of them. It was Kofi the Bull, the same man I was supposed to wrestle in the second trial. He laughed loudly. "Let the fools search the forest," he said. "The drum stays hidden here." Another man nodded. "No one can win the trials if we control the first one." My mind raced. So the trials were already being cheated. But something else caught my attention. Behind the drum was a sack. Inside the sack, a frightened goat bleated softly. The third trial suddenly made sense. Goats had been disappearing for months. And now I knew why. The scandal in Asempa was bigger than anyone imagined. And for the first time in my life, being called curse might actually work in my favor. I stayed hidden behind the thick roots of an old tree, barely breathing. Kofi the Bull and his two companions continued talking, unaware I was there. Once the trials fail, Kofi said, grinning, "The chief will have no choice but to marry Ome to me." One of the men laughed. "And the palace will eventually be yours." The third man kicked a sack of goats carelessly. "Besides," he added, "no one suspects us. They are too busy blaming that cursed boy." I clenched my fist. So the missing goats, the hidden drum, the entire challenge, everything had been rigged. Kofi wasn't just strong. He was greedy. But then something unexpected happened. A loud branch snapped behind me. The men turned instantly. "Who's there?" Kofi shouted. My heart stopped. A small monkey jumped down from the branches, chattering loudly. The men relaxed. "Just an animal," one said. But the monkey stared directly at me, as if it knew I was there. When the men eventually left the clearing, I slowly stepped out. The golden drum gleamed under the dim forest light. I touched it carefully. For years, the villagers had believed I brought bad luck. Maybe, just maybe, that reputation would keep them from suspecting me now. I grabbed the drum and untied the sack of goats. "Go," I whispered. The animals scattered into the forest. Tomorrow, the village would see the missing drum. Soon after, they would see something else. The truth. And when that truth exploded, Asempa would never look at Kojo the Curse the same way again. The next morning, the entire village gathered in the square. Men who had attempted the first trial returned empty-handed, sweaty, and embarrassed. Kofi the Bull arrived last, pretending to look exhausted. "The forest spirits guarded the drum," he said dramatically. The villagers nodded nervously. Then I walked into the square, carrying the golden drum on my shoulder. Silence spread across Asempa like wildfire. A woman dropped her basket of tomatoes. An elder rubbed his eyes. Even Chief Kwabina leaned forward in disbelief. "You!" Kofi growled. I set the drum in the center of the square. "I believe this belongs to the village." Amma covered her mouth, trying to hide her smile. But Kofi's face darkened. "That is impossible," he snapped. "The forest spirits." "Spirits?" I interrupted calmly. The crowd leaned closer. "Strange," I continued. "Because the only things I saw in the forest were 3 men hiding the drum." The square erupted in gasps. Kofi's fist clenched. I pointed toward him slowly. "One of them was you." The accusation fell like thunder. Before Kofi could speak, a group of goats suddenly ran through the square, bleating loudly. The same goats that had been disappearing for months. Villagers stared in confusion. I smiled slightly. Perhaps someone should also explain why those goats were tied beside the drum. The scandal exploded instantly. Kofi's allies looked terrified. The chief's voice boomed across the square. "Kofi, step forward." For the first time in years, the villagers were not staring at me with suspicion. They were staring at someone else. And the trials were far from over. The scandal from the forest spread through Asempa like a wildfire during Harmattan. Kofi's accomplices were dragged before the chief and quickly confessed. Fear loosened their tongues faster than truth ever could. But Kofi refused. He stood in the center of the square, chest wide, eyes burning with fury. "You think a cursed boy can destroy my name?" he shouted. The villagers murmured nervously. Kofi was still the strongest man in Asempa. Even angry elders stepped back when he moved. Chief Kwabena raised his staff. "The second trial remains," he announced firmly. Kojo must wrestle Kofi the bull. Gasps filled the square. Omar's smile disappeared. Kofi cracked his knuckles slowly. "Good," he said, grinning. "I will finish this curse today." The wrestling arena was drawn quickly in the red dirt. The entire village gathered around, forming a tight circle. I stepped into the ring. Kofi towered over me like a mountain of muscle. "You should have stayed cursed and quiet," he whispered. Then the fight began. Kofi rushed forward like a charging bull, exactly as his name promised. The crowd shouted wildly. I dodged at the last second. Dust exploded beneath his feet. Again he charged. Again I slipped away. Minutes passed. Kofi grew frustrated. His strength was great, but anger made him careless. Then he lunged too hard. I stepped aside and pushed. The giant stumbled. Kofi crashed face first into the dirt. Silence. Then the elder judge raised my hand. Kojo wins. The crowd erupted in disbelief. The cursed boy had just defeated the strongest man in Asempa. And only one trial remained. The one that would expose an even deeper scandal. That evening, Omar found me behind the mango grove where we used to sit as children. The sunset painted the sky in deep orange over the hills of Asempa. "You should be celebrating," she said softly. "I will," I replied, after the third trial. Omar hesitated. Something troubled her. "Kojo," she whispered, "there is something you must know." My chest tightened. The goats, the stolen drum, it wasn't only Kofi's plan. I frowned. "What do you mean?" Omar looked down at her hands. "I knew the goats were disappearing months ago." The word stunned me. "You knew?" She nodded slowly. "I followed Kofi once. I saw him hiding them." "Then why didn't you tell the chief?" I demanded. Omar sighed. "Because my father had already promised me to Kofi." The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. "What?" Omar finally looked up. Her eyes were fierce. "Kofi wanted power. My father wanted a strong successor. But I refused." "So the trials?" "Yes," she said. "I convinced my father to create them." My mind spun. "So you set all this in motion?" Omar stepped closer. "I didn't know you would step forward," she admitted. "But when you did, I realized something." "What?" She smiled gently. "The village called you cursed. But you were the only honest man brave enough to challenge them." My heart raced. "Kojo," she said quietly, "win the final trial." "What happens if I do?" Omar's voice softened. "Then the palace, and my hand in marriage, will truly be yours." But the final trial held a truth neither of us expected. A truth buried for 20 years. The next morning, the village square filled again. The final trial had arrived. Chief Kwabena stood beside the sacred stool, his face serious. "The third trial," he announced, "is to uncover the truth behind the stolen goats." Villagers murmured. Most already believed the mystery had been solved. But I stepped forward calmly. "With respect, Chief," I said, "the truth is deeper than Kofi." The crowd fell silent. Kofi, now tied between two guards, glared at me. "You already blamed me," he shouted. "Yes," I replied. "But you were not walking alone." Gasps spread through the villagers. Kofi's confident expression suddenly faded. I turned toward the crowd slowly. The goats were hidden in the forest. But someone helped sell them secretly in the next town. The villagers looked around suspiciously. Then an old trader named Mensema tried to slip quietly away. "Stop her," I said. The guards grabbed her instantly. Her face turned pale. "She carried the goats to market at night," I explained. "Kofi hid them. She sold them." Mensema broke quickly. "Yes," she cried. "But it was not my idea." The square held its breath. "Who?" the chief demanded. Mensema pointed with shaking fingers. Straight toward the palace. Toward the chief's own household servants. The crowd erupted in shock. For years, the palace guards had secretly joined the scheme. The scandal spread like thunder through Asempa. Chief Kwabena looked stunned. But slowly, the old man began to smile. Then he raised his staff high. "Kojo Mensa," he declared loudly, "you have completed the 3 trials of Asempa." The cursed-boy had just exposed the biggest scandal in the village. And according to the chief's own words, the palace now belonged to me. The transformation in Asempa happened almost overnight. The same villagers who once crossed the road to avoid me now bowed respectfully when I walked past. "Good morning, Kojo," they said politely. Some even called me Kojo the Brave. I tried not to laugh at the sudden change. The chief ordered the corrupt servants dismissed immediately. Kofi and his accomplices were banished from the village before sunset. For the first time in years, Asempa felt peaceful. But the biggest shock came during the evening gathering. Chief Kwabena stood before the villagers once more. "The trials were fair," he announced. "Kojo Mensa has proven wisdom, courage, and honesty." He paused, letting the moment breathe. "Therefore, according to tradition, he shall marry my daughter Omasawa." Cheers erupted across the square. Oma stood beside her father, smiling brightly. But the chief wasn't finished. "And when my time comes," he added, "Kojo will inherit the palace of Asempa." The crowd roared again. I looked around the square slowly. This was the same place where people once laughed at me. The same people who said I brought misfortune. Now they were celebrating me. Oma leaned closer and whispered softly, "I told you they would regret it." I shook my head, smiling. Maybe the curse wasn't real after all. Oma laughed quietly. "Oh, Kojo," she said playfully. "The curse was real." I stared at her in confusion. She winked. "But it wasn't yours." And the truth behind that statement would change how I saw my life forever. A few days after the celebrations, Chief Kwabena called me privately into the palace. Oma sat quietly beside him. The old chief looked thoughtful, almost amused. "There is something you deserve to know, Kojo," he said. My stomach tightened. "For years," he continued, "the villagers believed you were cursed." "Yes," I replied carefully. The chief sighed. "That rumor started with me." I blinked in disbelief. "You?" Oma laughed softly. "My father protected you," she explained. The chief nodded slowly. "When you were a baby, bandits attacked your parents' farm," he said. "Your father died defending the village cattle." My chest tightened painfully. I had never known the full story. "You were brave even as a child," the chief continued. "Too brave. Some greedy men feared you might grow powerful one day. So you called me cursed?" I asked. "Yes," the chief admitted. "No one dares challenge a cursed boy. It kept dangerous people away from you." The truth stunned me. All those lonely years had secretly protected me. Oma reached for my hand. "And now," she said gently, "the curse has served its purpose." The chief smiled proudly. "You faced ridicule, yet remained honest," he said. "That is why you deserve the trials." Outside, Villagers celebrated again in the square. I looked out from the palace balcony beside Oma. The same village that once feared me now cheered my name. Kojo the curse was gone forever.
I kindly plead with our first-time viewers to kindly subscribe to our channel. And to our dearest subscribers, thank you for joining us again. Please help to like, drop a comment, and click on the notification bell to always get our new videos. Thank you.